by storm, leading the charge on election integrity. Recently, Arizona did perform audits in Arizona, and you're hearing about it everywhere. And we brought on the source. We brought on State Senator Rogers today to tell us what is exactly going on in Arizona. We hear everything, we see it all over Twitter, but we want to hear it from you. Can you tell us what they found?
Well, thank you, Lauren, for having me. I represent Northern Arizona, and we, of course, had our preliminary report put out in a hearing last Thursday by my colleagues, State Senator President Karen Fann and Warren Peterson. And as you know, by background, Maricopa County is the most populated county in Arizona, predominantly the Phoenix area, where we then prevailed to audit 2.1 million ballots. And so the preliminary report that came out this past week was really, we think, pretty earth-shaking. I'll just tick off 3 or 4 data points which speak to the original now inaccuracy of the election certification, quote unquote, that we submitted several months ago. For example, 37,000 plus security queries were made in March of this year, whereby thousands of logs were deleted. Almost 4,000 people registered to vote after the October 15th deadline, yet were allowed to vote. 11,000 plus voters were not on the voter rolls November 7th, a few days after the election, but miraculously showed up in December, on December 4th. I mean, how does that happen, right? And then 18,000 voted in November, but then were removed from the voter rolls after the election. But the most staggering statistic is that 74,000 plus mail-in ballots were mailed in and counted as votes, but were not tracked as having been sent out originally to the voters. So how does that even happen? And all of these anomalies speak to the inaccuracy of the election thus far with what we know.
Can you tell us about the bleeding Sharpies? You know, we've been hearing about that. And I saw, there was a tweet that came out from the Maricopa County election audit page where they were talking about the Sharpies that they made voters use, that they were bleeding through. And you made a really interesting suggestion yesterday, we read, about possibly that they did that to specifically tarnish Republican ballots, because Republicans were the ones that came in to vote on election day. Can you tell us your theory with that?
Well, you exactly jumped right on it. We knew that Republicans were going to wait. Everybody knew in the country that was the prevailing mindset, that Republicans would wait until Election Day to vote in person to ostensibly know that their ballot was not disposed of or, thrown away on its way to the poll. So a lot of people showed up in person to vote. And interesting that you asked me, because I performed sort of an experiment for myself with a Sharpie, and I filled in what a bubble would be on a regular piece of paper from my printer, and sure enough, it bled through. And so this speaks to this situation where if a voter were to show up to vote and then they print off his ballot, and there's no consistency, by the way, on the type of paper that a polling location could utilize. They could go to Kinko's or Office Max and get a ream of paper and print off ballots, and they did. And there's actually nothing written against doing that. We need to tighten that up. But they did, and so that could happen with a Sharpie. And you exactly hit the nail on the head. So all of these anomalies speak to the fact that the Maricopa County Board of Supervisors has a lot of explaining to do. But what do? They continue to obstruct and obfuscate and go whining, honestly, to the left and to the media to try to, as we say in the Air Force, run top cover for them, and it's just not working. And so I get this question on every interview I do. Senator Rogers, why would these people continue to be intransigent and unhelpful? Because don't they all want to know the truth just as we do? And I would say to you, I guess not, because human nature would lead me to think they are either embarrassed or covering up or whatever. But something interesting that CEO Doug Logan told me of Cyber Ninjas, the most tech savvy guy on the whole operation, the boss, he said that where there is most resistance, what little areas there is most resistance are usually the areas they're trying to cover up.
Okay, yeah.
Well, Senator Rogers, on the bleeding Sharpie, and some have called it Sharpie Gate. I think the bleeding Sharpie is much like the hanging Chad of the 2000 election, in the sense that that is something we can directly look at and question. First of all, who even made the call? You'd have to have gotten that approved, right? To decide to use a Sharpie that on election day to fill out the ballot. And what you're actually proposing is the direct, I guess, vulnerability, the liability of using an electronic machine to count or to organize the ballots after a ballot has been filled out. I mean, the bleeding Sharpie, to me, it makes me wonder if this has been done throughout the nation. Do you know who ordered it on November 3rd?
This memo came out October 22nd, and I'll read you the highlighted part. We need, and this is a Maricopa County official cascading down to the underling officials under her. And this is 9 o'clock at night, October 22nd. And she says, thank you for all your support and hard work. And now I want to speak to what writing implements to use. She said, starting tomorrow, 23 October through 2 November, we're asking that clerks hand the voters ballpoint pens, capital letters, rather than markers. And then the next sentence, we need to use markers on election day. But for now, and through the 2nd of November, hand the voters a ballpoint pen. Please message this to your inspectors and ensure they pass the word to everyone on the board. So this is of course online now and being seen for what it was. And you asked me, well, is this a nefarious attempt to undermine an election? Hard to say, but it sure looks suspicious when so many ballots then had to be quote unquote adjudicated because of the bleed through.
Wow. Well, I'll tell you what, Senator Rogers, what that makes me think, it wasn't my county, I'm out here in Florida. That happened here, and they changed the rules just for election day, when again, the majority of Republicans would be voting, not those who are sending in mass mail-in ballots, absentee voters, all these other mechanisms which were used really for the first time in mass during the 2020 election. We'd be calling to get rid of those election voting machines. Really, the counting machines and also the machines themselves. I think this would be a clear evidentiary point to really point toward, other than the exorbitant price these companies charge. Is this going to be the route to get elections back to the way they do it in India and other countries, with your finger going into a piece of red paint and